Thank you so much, Brianna. It's such an honor to be here in so many ways. iNaturalist has really grown up with this association with participatory sciences. I know I feel this way, and Allison and Carrie, who you guys will hear from later, have been very closely involved in participatory sciences. So it's really when Jennifer and Rihanna asked me to come talk, say some lessons from iNaturalist, I was like, wow, this is fantastic, because it really is a journey in terms of the whole field, in terms of what we've been trying to do. So what I thought I'd do is just try to give a couple lessons, 5 lessons from iNaturalist and just where we've been, that hopefully you guys can take with all the different projects that you're involved in. And I think a lot of them are really generalizable, because what we're trying to do is such a unique thing, which is try to get ordinary, regular people involved in science and discovery and things like conservation, applied sciences. And it's a really unique effort. And there's not a lot of things to point to look for analogs. So iNaturalist started as a master's project at UC Berkeley about 17 years ago. It was started by Kenichi Ueda, who's the guy with the bandana. I've been involved for about 15 years. And over that time, like Rihanna said, I've helped it grow into one of the world's largest. I'll be using citizen science, participatory sciences interchangeably. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Apologies. Yeah, so the kind of big theme with iNaturalist has been trying to keep this thing growing slowly over time. That's a seasonality. It's mostly Northern Hemisphere. So these are the number of observations over time. We now have hundreds of millions of observations contributed by millions of people around the world. And like Rihanna said, we have about 1 in 4 of all species documented. So the big pattern here is growth over time and then the seasonality. But we broke 8 million observations per month for the first time this April, which is really exciting. Thank you. This is, I think I might have to point this way when I use the clicker. So this is just if you take that same graph over time on a map, which I think is kind of cool. So 2011, the early days of iNaturalist, mostly North America. 2015, we start kind of taking off a little bit in Europe, places around there. You can almost start to see the seasonality. Here's where COVID hit, which was actually a really important time for iNaturalist, because everybody was stuck at home, nothing to do. And there's 2024, so this is this last year. So it's been a slog, and I think that's it's not on my list of 5, but one of the most important lessons is these things take time. They really take significant periods of time for these things to get off the ground. So don't get discouraged, stay at it. But that's not one of my lessons. My first lesson is you have to focus on a critical challenge. And I think that's something that is going to be really important too, because there's so many distractions. It's so easy to get pulled in, especially when you're a small project and you don't have, people are kind of pushing over here and you go, wait, maybe I can get a grant to do this. But I think it's really important that we stay focused on our particular niche and mission. With iNaturalist, it's very clear. So we're really focused on trying to shine a scientific spotlight on the 2 million plus species that we share the planet with. So there's probably many more than that. There's probably about 10 million species, and they don't even have names. And the simple problem is we just don't even have enough scientists to name these things or discover these things, let alone manage them and protect them. These are species that are really, really important for us. And then the other big problem, let alone describe and figure out what these things are and just document them, is that we're losing them. So we're losing species at a really incredible rate. So the projections are that we're going to lose 1/3, 1 in 3 species by the end of the century, which is a really big deal, right? So with iNaturalist, that's what we're focused on. Can we document, can we get people engaged in celebrating, documenting, and protecting this diversity of life? But I think it's been really important part of iNaturalist's success that we've stayed pretty focused on that, because there have been a lot of opportunities to kind of maybe do this or that or that. And I think a lot of our success is staying focused on that mission. And you'll need that, to keep that anchor, that bearing, as you navigate tough times like we have over the years. Number 2, and this is one I can't emphasize enough. You have to make doing this stuff fun. And I know this is hard. I'm a scientist. It's hard for scientists. We like complicated. We like not fun. We like grueling. But especially in this day and age, when there's so many things competing for people's attention, no one is going to participate in your project if it's not fun. So has anybody, raise your hand if you've participated in iNaturalist or tried it out. All right. So we spent a lot of time trying to make this app fun, so make it easy. So this is basic idea, you go out, you take a picture of any living thing, and we have an AI that will identify it, but then you post it and you share it. And that's really where the magic happens. That's where what I got interested in science was this kind of thrill and discovery, the process. Oh my God, this is really this exciting thing. But in order to get people to have a chance at that, we have to get them to actually go outside. We have to get them to observe. We have to get them to post. Those are a lot of steps, and you're not going to get people to actually the scientific part of it if it's too complicated or it's not fun. And but in terms of the discovery, the things that can happen, I mean, these are kind of extreme examples, but I thought I'd share a couple examples because they really are cool. So this is a woman named Glenda Walters. She's a retiree in Australia, and she was out on a hike, and she saw this little mantis. So she took an iNat observation and posted it, and it's a completely new species of mantis. So it was given this name, Inimia nat, which abbreviates to, so abbreviates to iNat. iNat is the nickname for iNaturalist. But that name in itself is it honors this kind of participatory scientist, like the magic that can happen when you bring ordinary people like Glenda together with scientists to make these kinds of discoveries. We're seeing these kind of things happen every month, which is really cool. I'm just going to show a couple more. Oops, back. Sorry, forward. Okay, so this is Abigail DePozo, and she's a student in Ecuador. So she was doing a class field trip near Quito, and she saw this butterfly and posted it to iNaturalist. And again, it's a completely new species of butterfly, and it's not that far from Quito, which is pretty amazing that we're still discovering new species of butterfly not far from major metropolitan areas, which I think is cool. But again, I'm showing insects, things like that. What about birds, right? Birds are the most studied groups of animals in the world. Well, this is Tom Viris, and he was a filmmaker, and he was on a scouting trip in Papua New Guinea. So he was out scouting for this film, and he sees this bird up in a tree, and he takes a photo of it. And these are the first ever photographs of this bird. It's a bird that hadn't been seen for 50 years. It's called the New Britain goshawk. And he just happened to be there in the right place at the right time. That's the magic of participatory sciences, is you have all these eyes and ears on the ground to do this. And then I like this one because this was just published last month, I think. So this happened last year, but Deb Manley was in Big Bend National Park in Texas. And she saw this plant that she didn't recognize. She posted it to iNaturalist. And again, it's this completely new species of plant. And that's inside of a national park, inside of the United States, which is amazing. I mean, it's amazing to me that we're still discovering new plants in very, very well-studied places like national parks, which is pretty cool. But this is my favorite one. So this is Juan Daru, and he's a Colombian architect. And he was in this remote cabin in the Andes. And all of a sudden, this cabin, this weasel, jumps in the window. And it starts running around the cabin, so he grabs this photo, he takes these pictures. But the amazing thing, these are the only known photographs of this weasel. It's amazing. It's incredible. It jumps in the window, and the photos are on this toilet. So we go from an animal only known from skins to hashtag toilet weasel. It's trending when this happened. So this is what happens when you make citizen science easy and fun, right? But here's my next lesson. My next lesson is make it social. I mean, the thing about citizen science is people are involved. And sometimes people make that sound like a liability, like, oh, citizen science, you have people involved. That's a feature, not a bug. No, it really is. I mean, you have so many opportunities with citizen science to get this magic that happens like here, bring people together, and do things where I like to think of iNaturalist as like going for a run. You can go for a run, you can take some observations by yourself, but you can go for a run with a friend. Or you can participate in a 10K, or you can participate in the Olympics if you're a really good runner. And that's what we've tried to do with iNaturalist with these things called bioblitzes. Raise your hand if you heard about a bioblitz. All right. So this is a bioblitz in Sri Lanka, organized by the Young Biologists Association. But these really are these incredible opportunities to take a citizen science project and turn it into almost like a movement. Really get people involved. They become these sort of engines for knowledge transfer. And again, if bioblitzes are like a 10K, for sure the Olympics of bioblitzes is something called the City Nature Challenge. Whoops. Have you guys heard about the City Nature Challenge? All right. So the City Nature Challenge has become the largest annual census of life on Earth. It started as just a friendly competition between San Francisco and Los Angeles. Allison Young here started it. She can tell you all about it. But it's grown into hundreds of cities around the world doing this annual competition. It's really amazing. We had the City Nature Challenge this year had, on one day, we had over 1 million observations posted in one day of 1 in 40 of all species on the planet monitored, which is pretty amazing to think of every little frog and moth and fish in the world, 1 in 40 checking in on a single day, thanks to this thing. It's just, it's become this amazing celebration of life on Earth, which is pretty cool. Neat little, this is down in Mexico. This is sort of a hodgepodge of City Nature Challenge footage. Okay, but what makes what we're doing different than anything else? Like, I've been using a lot of sports analogies, like running and things like that. Remember, we're doing science. Don't forget we're doing science, right? And science means many things, but one way of thinking of science is you're building a scientific instrument. Like, so many scientific discoveries have come from some new tool. Like, think of the microscope, right? Someone took this microscope and they were able to see something that no one else could see before. That's the thing. It's a scientific instrument. All the stuff that's happened with genetic sequencing and things like that, it's a new scientific tool. Telescopes, the stuff that's happening with AI, with like protein folding. There's just a new tool that enables us to see something that no one could see before. And then you have to have someone to actually look at that and make sense of it, put it in context, publish it. And that's, for us, we've really just focused on making iNaturalist open. That's a way for us to do that without actually having to do that. Rihanna mentioned that iNaturalist had over 6,000 publications. We didn't write those papers, right? It was just getting this instrument that can see things that no one else has seen, and then getting that out, making it open as possible so that all sorts of people around the world can work on that data, mash it up, breathe new life into it, incorporate it into their own projects, and create science. So I think, again, citizen science, the more open it is, the better it is. Just can't overemphasize that enough. Just make your projects open, make it easy to use, make it easy to access. Here's kind of what I mean by a new scientific instrument. So my background, I was a scientist in my past life, and I was really interested in biogeography and the impacts of climate change on species, and that is kind of what led me into the whole iNaturalist journey. But so this whole thing of range shifts, how is climate impacting species, right? And this whole thing of climate refugees. We know this is happening. We know that climate is changing where species can live and species have to move to keep up, but we didn't have the right instrument to see that. It was very, very, very hard for scientists to even see that. But now with iNaturalist, we can see that all over the place happening. So this is just one example. This is something called the large Mexican fiddler crab. And this was the distribution of this thing. So each of these are iNaturalist points up to 2018. So you see the furthest north point for this thing was just south of the United States. It had never been seen in the United States. But what's happening to the water is getting warmer. So these crabs are moving north. And now if we look at the distribution, you see these crabs all up in San Diego, even as far as Los Angeles. So again, that's what I mean by a new scientific instrument. It's that simple. We're just doing something that allows anybody to see, because it's open, things that we couldn't see before. That's the microscope aspect of it. And by making it open, anybody can look at these data and write up a paper. So this was published by a crab researcher in a journal, but we didn't have to directly orchestrate that process. It's open data. Anybody can access it. So where does that data come from? I just had to throw this in because this is this great footage from this great project, Snapshot Coast, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, which is, again, a citizen science project run by Rebecca Johnson up and down the coast with people monitoring tide pools and resulting in data like that crab data. Kind of gratuitous here, but I had to throw in this footage because it's so beautiful. So we talked about range shifts, right? Climate refugees, species moving north. What happens with this kind of enemy release thing where species all of a sudden are popping up over in far places, right? Invasive species. We're seeing a ton of that with climate change. So this is a species that's native to Europe, right? And now it's invasive in the United States. You see it has this eastern northeast range, right? And look where it is too. It's over in Portland, Oregon. Yeah, does anybody know what this species is? Well, there's a lot of, this is actually a harmless little isopod, but it's just actually, I don't think it causes any problem. But the reason I brought this up is there's a lot of situations like this where you have a species that establishes itself in the northeastern part of the United States, and then establish itself up in Seattle and Oregon. I'm from California. We don't get these things in California. It's too dry and too hot. But you see these things pop up. So like one appeared there, probably moving around in like a garden plant or something, but they can't get established. So that's all just prelude to what about this? Okay, here's a species that's native to China. And look what's happened. It's caught on in the eastern United States, right? And then it's sort of popping up a couple other places, garden plants. Does anybody know what this is? Yes, the spotted lanternfly, the worst invasive species of them all. Is anybody here from the East Coast? You hate this thing. It's no good. And this was just, I think the day before yesterday I saw this. This was May 25th. So Josie Graydon, who could be here, for all I know, is Josie here? Does anybody know Josie? From Portland. And she spotted this a couple days ago. What is that? That's a spotted lanternfly nymph. And then this data got into the Oregon Department of Agriculture is looking into this. And so far, so good. It's probably one of those that isn't getting established. But they estimate that invasive species cost $100 billion a year annually to of economic damage. So things like zebra mussels clogging dams. And once these things are established, they're almost impossible to get rid of. But this early detection system, if we can keep spotted lanternfly out of Portland, you know, this is the only way we're going to do it, is this constant monitoring. And, you know, these data can power things like this. So again, it's just an instrument, and then making it open so people like the Department of Oregon Agriculture can access this data. You know, we're not orchestrating this stuff. It's just happening by making things open, by making it appropriate scale, hopefully suitable data. So we talked about species shifting, species exploding. What about contractions? And everything I was talked about before was one observation, like these kind of amazing discoveries, or like this one spotted lanternfly, or that one crab. But you know, a lot of these discoveries come from looking at tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of observations at once and doing really complicated statistical analyses. But this was this paper I really liked that was published in Science, and it looked at hundreds of thousands of iNaturalist observations of butterflies and was able to show that they're declining. So you can see that Gaussian curve has shifted over this way, that these butterflies are decreasing across the West. And that's the other side, it's all because of drying from droughts. So that's the other side of climate change, right? It's causing some species to expand, but it's causing a lot of them to contract. And again, we didn't publish this paper. This was just by making this data available. And it's a large enough data set that a lot of these big data sort of machine learning algorithms can pull out these really interesting patterns. This stuff is all really up my alley because, like I said, my background is in biogeography and data science. But another thing I think is really cool is that while everything I've talked about so far is points on a map, a lot of the interesting discoveries and papers that are coming out of iNaturalist now aren't using the point on the map. They're using stuff that's inside the photograph, which is really cool. Like, see this parrot eating this fruit? So this is a parrot that was only thought to eat one species of palm, and it's an endangered parrot. So it had all these habitat conservation plans and things like that that were focused on like figuring out where that palm is. If you have enough of that palm, you could support that bird. But then the scientists looked at all these iNaturalist photos and realized that the bird was actually eating all sorts of different kinds of fruit. And so it actually has a much more general diet than was thought. And so these photographs, which I always tended to think in the early days of iNaturalist as kind of vouchers, is like proof, you know, the proof that this point on the map is legit, kind of like a museum specimen, you know, that pin specimen is proof that that butterfly was actually collected there. But it turns out the photo itself is this really, really rich data set. And I'm seeing all sorts of interesting studies now that are using morphology, so things like plants changing color to adapt to climate change, you know, becoming darker, which reflects sun easier. Phenology, so looking at when the flowering happens, the flowers appear in the photos. Movement, you know, people can detect roadkill within photos and things like that. Reproduction, interactions between species, so like birds eating fruit. So all of these really interesting ecological patterns are inside that photograph. That was just kind of a byproduct. I mean, not really a byproduct, but it wasn't the key sort of scientific input of iNaturalist. It was the point on the map is what I think most of the focus is on. And that, again, has just become, because now we have this big corpus of photos, hundreds of millions of photos, and these new sort of pattern recognition tools are able to sort of crack into this for the first time. I think it's really cool. It's very analogous to me to DNA. You know, so when you think of museums, people were collecting these specimens, and then no one even knew about DNA back when Lewis and Clark were, you know, collecting things and putting them in museums. And then once the genetic tools became available, people were like, wow, you know, these DNA tells this really rich story. We have all this collection of DNA from these museums, and we have the genetic tools to make sense of them. So, you know, this whole renaissance of really interesting science happened. And I'm seeing a very similar thing happening with all this interesting computer vision, pattern recognition stuff that's happening based on looking at photos itself, which is really cool. And again, so that's another, I guess, micro lesson is just, you never really know where things are going to go. And I think AI maybe exacerbates that with everybody right now. We don't really know where this is, so we're all sort of trying to figure it out. But for us, this whole computer vision thing has just been a really unexpected and interesting journey that's helped with iNaturalist. I mentioned DNA. I just brought this up because I think this is so cool. But I just became aware of this group of a couple groups on iNaturalist that are going out. They're all mushroom people, you know, which is funny. I don't know what it is about mushroom people, but they're going out and they're photographing mushrooms and posting them to iNaturalist, which is the normal thing that you do. But then they're also collecting them, and they're taking these samples, and then they're mailing them to a friend who they met on iNaturalist, and that friend has a lab set up in the garage, and they're actually extracting the DNA, sequencing it with these nanopore technology, and then posting the DNA sequence to iNaturalist, which is really, really interesting to me. So this is Alan Rockefeller. I had to go see this, so I went to his garage in Oakland. And this is Stephen Russell, who published this paper recently on this, you know, where they came up with 73 newly discovered species of mushrooms that were never known just from these unique genetic sequences. And again, this is another example, like the photos. We had no idea this was going to happen. We had no idea that people were going to have the ability to sequence DNA in their garages, and no idea that people were going to use this platform that we made to like mail each other and coordinate and decentralize this. But again, super, super, super cool. So I think, again, we kind of made iNaturalist for points on a map, but all sorts of interesting thing has come about, and just listen for those things and seize on them. So that's sort of broadening this instrument that we built from just being a sort of a biogeography instrument to a computer vision instrument or a DNA instrument. So that's the lesson, is just kind of watch for those things. Okay, my last lesson, and this kind of links into what Jen was saying, is we're in a really dark time for science, a really dark time. And you know, the theory of change for a lot of what I've been saying is, you know, you create this data, you put it out there, someone's going to publish a paper, someone's going to take that paper in front of policymakers, and they're going to change policy and blah, 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 blah. And now we're seeing all of that, these institutions just under attack. We don't even know if policy is going to get made. We don't even know if scientists are going to be funded to take this data and, you know, actually publish a paper on it. So I challenge us right now as a society, as an association, to really not just stop at science. Think of the solution. My PhD advisor always told me, like, the difference between conservation and science is that conservation, there's this urgent sick patient. It's just like being a doctor, right? You're using science, but the mission is to like keep the patient from dying. With conservation, we're using science, but our mission is to keep species from going extinct. And I think with citizen science, sure, we have this theory of change that we're going to, you know, get this data out there. There's going to be scientific publications, policy is going to change. But I think we also need to use our programs and our platforms to actually go directly to the solutions, figure out how to crowdsource and decentralize the solutions. I think iNaturalist has a long way to go on this, but I thought I'd just show you two examples that were really inspiring to me and something that I would like to see a lot more on the platform. So this is Heather Holm. So she is, many of you maybe know her. She's an amazing pollinator biologist living in the Midwest, does a lot of bioblitzes on iNaturalist, so getting people out to monitor bumblebees, but then started noticing that this rusty patch bumblebee was declining, right? So in addition to monitoring and creating scientific data, Heather, you know, is mobilizing, you know, her communities to actually go and restore these habitats, which is really cool. So it's no longer, this is no longer science. This is stewardship and restoration. You're going out, ripping out the invasive buckthorn, planting wildflowers, attracting the pollinators. And that's the impact that you want to see. You skip the sort of scientific publication and the policy change, and actually crowdsourcing the solutions. It's so cool to me. This is something I would like to see so much more of on our site. This is another example. This is Sally Gale. So Sally is a rancher in Petaluma in California. And she, on her drive home, she would just see all these smushed newts on the road. And she kind of couldn't take it anymore. She's like, I can't deal seeing all this carnage on my drive home. So she started organizing her community as these amphibian crossing guards. No kidding. I went out to go see this. So they go out on rainy nights, right? And then she organizes her whole community to go out and literally bucket brigade these newts across the road, which is pretty cool, and putting in these signs and things like that, and then using these data to design and build underpasses to help the newts cross safely, right? So it's such a cool, complete cycle from noticing where the newts are getting hit to actually intervening and, putting in a solution. And it's, again, a step beyond science. I mean, so many people will criticize science as like, are you just watching frogs go extinct? Are you just watching the Titanic go down? And like, no, we can use the same systems that we're building here together to actually crowdsource solutions, which is really, really cool. And I think that this is something that, for me, makes the environmental crisis tractable. I mean, it's such an overwhelming crisis that we're in, like we're saying, with all the stuff that's happening with science and governments. It's just so easy to just throw up your hands and be like, there's nothing we can do about this. This is totally overwhelming. But if you think about people like Heather and Sally, who are actually taking these little pieces of the solution and doing it, I mean, that's what gives me hope. I really think that if you take something like the biodiversity crisis that we're focused on, and we all think if we can do our little part, we can actually solve this, we can do this. And so what I would like to see for iNaturalist, but for all these projects too, is that we even go a step beyond citizen science to citizen solutions. So this is my little slide here. I should have had this going when I was just talking because it's going to take a while. But I think the cool thing about iNaturalist, again, and this applies to all participatory sciences projects, is that you have that link to an individual person who has an experience that they could never have without participating in this really authentic, magical, beautiful moment of discovery. But if you take all of that participation, scientists are getting tools and solutions that we couldn't get individually. And that's, for me, what makes citizen science such a win-win and such a magical thing, and why it's such an honor to be here talking to all you guys. Thank you guys so much.